I'm talking about, and I'm absolutely delighted that I was able to invite each one of these gentlemen to come up and share with you their thoughts around investing in neurogaming and what this really means for investing in the experiential neurotechnology space over the long term. The day has really started out, with a deep dive into sensory gaming technology platforms. We've talked a little bit about virtual reality. And from there, we've also gone into some of the cognitive technologies, the halo neurosciences, some of the TDCS. So we're really talking about a broad swath of these technologies, and just to sort of lay the land for all of us again. When we talk about neurogaming, we're really talking about a convergence of technologies, a bunch of input technologies and output technologies that are going to allow us to integrate our nervous system into the user experience in such a profound way that we'll be able to develop new applications for health, for wellness, for education, for training, performance, and more, and of course, entertainment. So on that, as sort of setting the stage, I think it probably would be most helpful for all of you to get to know the folks that we have brought together here today. So Tim, why don't we start it out with you? Give us a little bit about your background and what you think.
Sure. Can you guys hear me? I'm Tim Chang with Mayfield Fund, an early stage venture capital firm based here in Silicon Valley. I've been focused in this area kind of on a personal basis, been a long time quantified self geek, body hacker, and now I guess sort of more and more neuro and consciousness hacker. But early on led the Series A in a company called Lumosity, which helped with some of the brain training games for the mass market, and then was very early on in wearables before it was kind of a term, but put a team together and formed a company called Basis, which we funded and then sold to Intel last year. In sort of heart rate tracking and bio tracking, but have been very, very interested in where it progresses from here. I do a lot of investments in next-gen wellness and health and self-development, so it's around the realms of physical fitness and wellness, mental health and wellness, then sort of where I'm viewing next is sort of emotional and spiritual fitness and wellness, if you will.
Andy Furlick.
Andy Furlick, and I also have some historic relationship to Mayfield Fund. They were the Series A investor in a company where I was a founder, an inventor of a technology that was an invasive neurotechnology. My background is in neurosurgery, and then I've been an entrepreneur and investing for the last 15 years or so. But I think we're really in the golden age of neuro right now, in part just as we've seen during this conference, that because of the non-invasive and highly interactive and immersive nature of the technology that's being brought to bear on the field. So super exciting time as an investor and as an entrepreneur.
Ajay, could you share us a little bit?
I'm Ajay Singh from Samsung Global Innovation Center. I'm part of the early stage investments group there. What we work with is disruptive products that are coming out of outside world within Samsung. So can you guys hear me? Yeah. We do investments, we do partnerships, we do acquisitions, and we do incubation of companies within our group. So far for us, all the themes that you can see that Samsung is involved in are the focus areas for us. Personally, for myself, I like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality. These are the areas for Samsung as a core focus as well. We have portfolio companies that we are invested in and we are managing them, but there are other interests coming out in the neuroscience space that we talked about earlier. There's a lot of progress happening in this area. There's a lot of good companies coming out with interesting approaches. So a lot to see in this area.
Charlie Hartwell.
Hi, I'm Charlie Hartwell. I work for a collaborative of investors called the Bridge Builder Collaborative, and it's a group of 4 investors who came together with a mission to help fund and scale and support companies in the space of mind training. We are completely focused on the mind training space and ask questions like, how do we help people connect more deeply to themselves so that they can live happier, healthier, less stressed lives? How do we reduce healthcare costs? We've invested in companies that are bringing meditation to global scale, companies that have happiness platforms. Interaxon, which is here, is one of our investment companies. Paratherapeutics is also one of our companies. And so we're just looking, I've seen this space for 3.5 years ago. I was asked to kind of see if there was anything to invest in this space, and it's remarkable what has happened over those 3.5 years, from well-developed concepts and now really serious experienced entrepreneurs bringing those out in in this country and globally. So it's a really fun place to be.
Andy Schwab.
Andy Schwab from 5AM Ventures, one of the co-founders of the firm, which is a life sciences venture capital firm, very classic, invest in new technologies to cure diseases. So very, very much of a healthcare focus. I'm a molecular biologist and a med school dropout by background, so try and, again, look at things from a medical perspective. As you look at the neuro field, it's an area obviously of major opportunity, but we're lacking a lot of the tools, at least historically lacking therapeutics and diagnostics to really look at disease and look at disease progression. And so we've made one investment in the NeuroGaming space in paratherapeutics, and very interested in other approaches to actually treat disease, because there's the opposite approach is to start very early and try to discover new drugs, which is very, very hard.
And Andy, maybe that's a great place to start. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Pear and what made you sort of decide to go forward with them even at their early stage.
So I think it really came out of that realization that the neuro field is so important, obviously, as you look at it both from a medical perspective, obviously also from a commercial perspective, so many good, such a big unmet medical need. But if you're going to go try and treat Alzheimer's with a therapeutic, you're talking about 10 years and $1 billion for a shot at success there. And so as we looked at the field and said, okay, are there some interesting opportunities and ways to take advantage of what's already known out there? And I think with Pear, which really has the pairing of a therapeutic and some game software app virtual reality environment, we felt like there was a synergy and a way to treat disease that wasn't going to take us 10 years and $1 billion to come to pass. I'm an amateur gamer by any standards, but I think we all appreciate that software apps, games have some impact on the brain. We know that pharmaceuticals have an impact on the brain, and is there a way to combine those in a beneficial way for patients? And that's what we're trying to do.
So, and Bridge Builders Collaborative recently joined in to support Pear as well, correct?
Correct. And we took a little bit of a different look at it, which is how do we actually get people to take less drugs by connecting more to themselves? How can you learn how to be self-responsible for your health care? There are so many interesting games out there, and many of the folks who started them are here, who are helping us with like the Achilles of the world, like Super Better or other games like that that are going to help us to learn and sort of learn our way out of the disease and take responsibility for it, as opposed to just having drugs. So we're not anti-drug, but we are about how do we get more self-responsible for our health care.
And Andy Furlick, you also took a look at Pear and are excited by it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's emerged from this whole thing is how we innovate in this space and how the paradigm is changing. So as Andy was talking about, the whole way to learn in drug discovery and drug development is, gather a certain amount of data in a small initial trial and advance that to a slightly larger next trial, and then roll the dice on a bigger trial, and either you have an innovation or you don't, and it either works on a population of patients or it doesn't. And really, if you flip all that upside down and say, it's really about how do we optimize the individual, as Charlie's saying, and how do we personalize this treatment, then it really becomes a requirement for a much more iterative discovery process of how we make a difference to people. And I think the software model is perfectly designed for that. And if we were in another conference in another room somewhere else in the city right now, somebody saying minimally viable product as the main thing they're saying. In healthcare, we say it's the maximally evolved product that finally makes it to the patient. But I think it's this sort of resonance between how do we get things out there, how do we get real world data and feedback that ultimately personalizes these kinds of things. And that's what excites me about companies like Pear that are sort of mapping software individualization to established sort of care paradigms.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's a light touch upon digital neurotherapeutics as they're sort of emerging in Pear's unique value proposition in that space. Tim, you've been a big fan of sort of the neuro-wellness space. I wonder if you could share some of your insights of some of the companies that you've seen sort of emerging and where you're placing your bets these days, or at least your intentions.
Sure. Where I tend to hang out is probably on the far extreme of the consumer end. I'm a big fan of that belief that evolution happens at the edges. So I like the fringes and the hackers and the weirdos and the people that everyone dismisses, because I always think things pop up from there, then move into the mainstream. As they move into the mainstream, then they're brought to enterprise. So I tend to be sort of like, like B to freaks, then B to C, then from B to
B to F, eh?
Then it goes usually from B to C to B to B, because usually where the business models evolve is then you go into freemium with consumer, that can often go into subscriptions, then that often attracts the interest of, say, self-insured employers first, and then the insurance companies and the payers, and then kind of things roll from there. So I tend to go on that end, but I'm very interested in what fringe groups, whether it's Mikey Siegel and the consciousness hacking labs, those folks are doing, the burners, the biohackers, those sorts of folks are looking at. Similarly, a company of mine, 3D Robotics, these were all the guys hanging out at Maker Faire, crowdsourcing drone designs. Now they're a big company. So I think that may happen in subsegments of this market as well, especially in the consumer-facing side. And games and entertainment are an awesome wrapper for bringing that to Main Street. It's a digestible form of it, but games is not the end-all be-all. I think it's the lowest hanging fruit for things in this area, as well as for VR, AR. But then I'm also looking for immersive storytelling, and then how that then folds into enterprise applications and that sort of thing. It's just that it's usually games and, well, hate to say, but even really fringy stuff like adult content that drives often the enabling technologies, the kind of capture, record, playback mechanisms that then make it to the rest of the market.
But you've been interested in games for quite some time. I mean, you were an early investor in Playdom. That played out very well, right? It was sold to Disney. So you've understand the value of game mechanics at a core, and that's really key to making an effective neurogaming application, whether you're talking about therapeutics, wellness, education, or training, is this whole idea of leveraging our capacity to be able to tell stories in a way, to engage the user in a way that actually makes things effective and interesting and entertaining so that they stick with it, right?
Right. It makes it more palatable and then sort of tastier for them to start with. And then you almost trick them into getting better. Because if you said, this is really good for you, people might not sign up just for that. It's sort of like, for my 2-year-old, I give her these gummy bear vitamins. She likes the gummy bear part, but she doesn't care that there's vitamins in there. I think this is a really interesting deployment strategy also for these wellness solutions, where if you say, this is going to take work and it's good for you, people might say, but then if you say, no, it's a heck of a lot of fun and visually appealing and very immersive storytelling, it's easier to, again, bring that more to Main Street.
And Ajay, from the corporate perspective at Samsung, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there, from your perspective with regards to entertainment applications that have sort of a neuro tinge or apply to the health and wellness space.
Right. So for us, we have a team that focuses on digital health. So we have investments arm that's a small team just focusing on that piece.
Right.
From a consumer electronics company's perspective, I think what we are looking at is very interesting use cases coming out of augmented reality and virtual reality spaces. These are still nascent spaces. Things are still coming up. But it's very interesting to see, even in neuroscience or medical field, how people are taking advantage of that and trying to build market applications with it. What we are seeing is the technology is there. It is evolving slowly. The ecosystem is healthy in terms of there is a momentum in building interesting applications, and storytelling is actually a very interesting piece on the content side that is coming up. So on the video applications, on the applications on photos, like how to bring it all together, the storytelling aspect is very, very important. And so I'm seeing the investments in the companies that are actually very carefully designing an experience around that. So there is a component of just trying to understand what the user might like in this virtual environment and how to bring it together with the technology that is available today and how it is actually coming up in the later years.
And so I guess, could you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing on the augmented reality side out there? I mean, it's an expanding field. There's, 60 companies now out there with different types of technologies. You've got everyone from Microsoft to Magic Leap to, smaller groups like Cast AR or got their money from Kickstarter. I mean, it's an exciting area and has pretty broad ramifications for mental health, for physical wellness, for education, for training. What are you seeing out there?
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything that you just mentioned. I think applications are out there, and I think people are thinking in the right directions. So the companies, I think, are going in the right direction. The only thing is the enabling technology, I think, augmented reality, and it's the same thing with virtual reality. I think it's not consumer ready today with virtual reality. One of the things that people worry about is the motion sickness or feeling a little bit nauseated within the virtual environment. And there are technologies that are helping solving those things. And same thing with augmented reality. I think there are a few challenges on the technology side that people need to solve to actually take it to the consumer finally. But on the enterprise side, I think there are use cases that are to be solved today. I think people are ready to pay for it. I think there was one company that already has an application with Stanford University where they are selling the device to Stanford to actually see a virtual body on the table where they can see what part moves in which way, how to operate. So these are the applications that they could not have done it 3-4 years ago. So these are the enabling things that are happening just because of these.
Right, it's like Z-Space out there.
Exactly.
Right, that capacity to sort of put on these glasses and be able to turn things in 3 dimensions. So if any of you haven't seen Z-Space, after this, please go check out their technology. It's absolutely fantastic. So that's a little bit about sort of the neuro wellness side. What are you seeing as a group of you, on the training and education side from an investment perspective?
I can go first. So on the education side, what we are seeing is there are companies that are focusing on training essentially, which is welding, carpentering, those kind of applications, and that there are schools, institutions just geared for that, and they're paying for those kind of services and applications. Mm-hmm. And then there are companies who are just giving a small hardware to a student and trying to give experiential learning to students where they can see a solar system, for example. It's a small thing, but for a kid, it's a big thing to actually see the Saturn rings, essentially. So those kind of use cases are coming out. So I think there's an interest in the educational community to see what kind of impact these augmented reality, virtual reality applications can do.
Just a comment on the readiness of the platform. It's interesting because we hear about this nausea phenomenon, and when I heard that, I was absolutely delighted because what I said to myself was, okay, now we know we're dealing with a potent neuroactive device because nausea is regulated by the CNS. So we're into something here that actually is a very potent technology. But it's often, I think that people are slow to recognize the potency of these things. And really, when you think about it from the brain's perspective, whether you are using it for to just change a brain state to achieve a wellness application or to answer the question about training, learning is really just another brain state. And so I see the platforms being the same across all of these different markets. So it's really about the content that we create on these platforms.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm really excited about those as killer use cases on both VR and AR. Mm-hmm. The AR one, the use case we're already seeing is field service professionals where you can do overlays on things and, it kind of gets to that point, remember in Matrix where it says, I know Kung Fu, or it's sort of in real time you're getting the information you need to fix that engine or that part out there in the field. On the learning part, I've always been a believer in show, don't tell, and where I think VR can take it is experience, don't watch. Right, and so I remember being at TED and Oculus did a demo. They showed what it's like to be inside the Syrian refugee camp to a bunch of UN, kind of delegates, and it was incredibly powerful for them to actually be there in that setting versus just hear about it in a report. And so I wonder how that impacts your experience when you're learning about, say, Christopher Columbus's voyage, to actually be there, in a recreation of that environment, have to deal with all those sorts of things and hear the sounds and the crew freaking out or whatnot. I think that could take sort of learning to a whole new level, and I wonder what Khan Academy could be like in that setting.
Right, absolutely. It's exciting, isn't it?
Transformative.
Right.
Yeah.
And Andy, are you seeing this on the healthcare side, early investor healthcare side?
I think to some degree, I think, again, we're looking at treatments, right? I think we're pretty focused on medical indications and treatments. So as you look at at what's out there, and you think about experiences, right? You think about virtual reality, and I do, as you think about this, of what is just distraction versus what is actually really impacting the brain for the long term. And I think that's a big question that continues to evolve and continues to be asked, and investors think about it the same way I'm sure scientists do, which is how do we prove that we're actually truly training the brain versus just distracting it from some other emotion or some other neurotransmission. So I think that's the way we're trying to evaluate it, and the tools that are getting created are incredible. And I think that the question for physicians is going to be, how do we use the tools more effectively to treat patients in combination with everything else we can do? And I think, again, in the CNS, you know that multimodal therapy works, right? We've been doing it with all sorts of different, whether it's talk therapy or whatever it is for decades. And I think especially as you think about virtual reality, it's an incredible opportunity, but we need to make sure we're asking the right questions and proving it with real data.
Charlie, the bridge builders are really focused in a deep way into the sort of the mind fitness space, if you will, and have been big supporters of the Wisdom 2.0 movement. I wonder if you could share with us what their intention there is and how they see that as part of their reason for investing in sort of neurogaming-ish applications.
So I think Bridge Builder starts with a social screen about how do we help people to connect with themselves. So when we look at any type of business model, we start with that and ask what is the social benefit. Then we look at the business model. So there's a lot of people in that sort of space that I would say have really good hearts, and some that have really great intentions, and more and more that have really sound business plans around them. And that is what I'm excited to see, is more people that really understand how to take products to market in the B2C space, in the B2B space, and where actually, like with one of our companies, eMindful, the science is actually going to actually prove the cost benefit of the use as opposed to just what's going into the product. So eMindful is an online platform with live mindfulness teachers that teach courses for people with cancer or diabetes or stress at work. And Aetna has rolled out their programs after doing a multi-million-dollar study on their own employees that proved that people with metabolic syndrome who went through an 8-week mindfulness course would save $2,000 per year per employee. And Mark Bertolini has talked about that in the New York Times, on CBS this morning. And to me, that's really what's interesting, are how do we use some of these ancient practices, but then bring them into our world in a scalable way that doesn't degrade the practice, that's scientifically validated, but also derives great benefit and is well marketed and have really good business models. So when we first were looking in that space, I saw a lot of great ideas with not very good business plans, and now I'm seeing a lot of very competitive space with really seasoned entrepreneurs who know how to bring these things to market in multiple formats.
Tim, you're nodding your head vigorously.
Yeah, I'm definitely a believer in bringing new technology and, say, old wisdom. And my personal goal is take it out of things that are considered granola or even religious or whatnot. And I'm thinking, with biofeedback and all of these sensors, you can someday empirically prove to the entire Western medical community, this does work. Look at how, say, the box breath pattern will drive your brain waves, et cetera, heart rate down to the state. Nicole Bradford, a friend of mine at a startup called Willow, she's getting to do a lot of testing with consumers to prove she can achieve measurable expanded consciousness state within 8 weeks under a certain program. That's mind-blowing and world-changing potentially, right?
Absolutely.
So these are like the benefits of an ayahuasca ritual or whatever it is, but delivered through technology without substances, right? That's, I think, the goal I'd love to see.
Yeah, I like I haven't heard beat a freak before. And I love it because really, if you're in the mindfulness community, you were a freak. If you're a scientist in the mindfulness space 10 years ago, you had to like be concerned that you were going to, that you were not going to have a career. Maybe it was 12 years ago, but not long ago. And so what you're talking about, Tim, I think is really powerful. And that came to scale very quickly, and we're still at the early stages, but we're past the tipping point there.
Right.
And now, how do we get into some of these deeper things that really, help us to get to a deeper level of consciousness? Because actually, we're not going to solve the problems of this world in the consciousness that we're currently living in. So if there are ways that we can enhance that, I think that's really interesting.
Just to interject a question for both of you, because I completely concur with the opportunity that you're describing, but I think those of us in this room need to shape the conversation and almost need a soundbite for how we describe this more broadly outside of this room, which is, what do you say to people who ask you, well, isn't it all this technology that's gotten into this problem, this cell phone that I'm addicted to?
Right.
How do we convince them that the technology is also going to get us out of this problem?
Well, I've always been a believer that technology is just a tool, and like any tool, all that matters is the intention that you bring to it, right? So technology can be used to make us less human and to make us more alienated from each other, but in the same vein, it could also be used to help us figure ourselves better and bring us closer. So I kind of have been thinking, what does machine-assisted empathy look like? And that, to me, is the real holy grail use case of VR, right?
Yep.
But that could potentially then, let's say you go to a school and say, we've got this software package and these super simple sensors. We can do mindfulness as like a service for you, and now you plug it into your phys ed program or into recess, and we guarantee within 8 weeks we'll bring down number of fights and this, that, and the other. I'm kind of curious to see if that can be delivered as almost like a SaaS platform.
Love it. So if there's a neuro freak out there with the empathy machine, we're investors right now. Just come on up, line up.
I mean, I think that's a beautiful point, it's circling it back to empathy, but let's take a step back and maybe explore the area of improving human performance and of elite athletes and how that might, I don't know if you believe in trickle down, but trickle down to the rest of us in some form or another. Are you seeing opportunities in that space? And if so, what's exciting you?
I see opportunities all the time. The way that these practices are coming into our culture is, at the end of the day, they're being sold as performance enhancers. And performance can mean everything from, if you're in sort of a current, focused, mindful state, your creativity is going to go up. Your ability to have compassion is likely to go up. So teamwork and productivity in a company are likely to improve. And stress is such a huge factor in our healthcare system. 70% of doctor visits are, and maybe I'm off by a few percentage points, but they're related to stress. And corporate employees are stressed to the max. So these tools really can help, and it doesn't have to be about, going back to the piece before, it doesn't have to be that you're using technology to achieve these. The technology can just teach you tools, and maybe the technology is saying, time to go for a walk, time to go outside in nature.
Right.
But it's not going to be sold into our culture unless there are performance benefits, and that's going to be, some of it's going to be about sports, some of it's going to be about education, some of it's going to be about work in the office.
Tim, your thoughts on performance?
Yeah, I've kind of have a little playbook for how you can pull it off. It ties back to, if you've ever looked at sort of fitness magazines, you know what sells those is, here's what Gerard Butler did, 90 days, get in shape for 300, and that's what moves those. But that's just basically usually interview and anecdotes. Now, if you were to pair that, the aspirational figure, plus some sort of sensor or device to be able to track it, plus some sort of personalized coach. It could be both AI plus human being for accountability, and maybe then a peer group that you can kind of work with. Then I would say, I guarantee you'll gain 10 pounds of muscle and you lose 10% body fat. That'll be $1,000 for as long as you follow this regimen, right? And Retrofit and others are proving that you can do that. So it's a combination of machine, AI, algorithm, trackers, but also humans. I think you're just not scared of notifications on your watch. You're going to dismiss them. You need that personalized coach that's going to kick your butt, and then also maybe a sympathetic peer group that's going through the same journey as you, same mechanics as AA, Weight Watchers, military boot camps, etc. I'm a big believer in that type of hybrid service for these performance enhancement.
Right, so that's physical performance, but what about emotional and cognitive performance? Maybe we need to have cognitive triathletes, right? What would a service like that look like? What would we need to pair together? Do we need to put together, closed loop TDCS with EEG, closed loop it, and bring in...
Next year, we should form a thing. Instead of Tough Mudder, it'll be Tough Minder. And we'll put
Tough
people
Minder,
through
nice.
these excruciating focus and concentration exercises and whatnot.
Zach, as you
Yeah.
know, I think you know, we're an investor also in a company called Chrono Therapeutics, which is a little bit different, but a lot of the same themes. So this is for smoking cessation, and essentially it's a wearable that delivers nicotine in a programmed way, and it's been proven that if you deliver nicotine proactively to people, they will stop smoking. So the nicotine works. The problem we have is that by the time you have a craving, you take 6 packs of gum, you try and throw them in your mouth, or you wear 16 patches and you get a base level of nicotine. What you really need is a bolus of nicotine as quickly as possible. And the other problem is that cigarettes really work, right? They're the most effective drug delivery device there is in terms of getting nicotine. So what Chrono's come up with is a wearable that delivers nicotine transdermally, and you only need small amounts of nicotine because it's a very potent drug to be delivered transdermally. So you have a wearable, and it becomes a lifestyle monitoring device that also is delivering drug at the same time, or delivering nicotine, I guess, not exactly a scheduled pharmaceutical anymore. But so it's that sort of combination, and then you combine it with a coach. So it's a smoking cessation program that is the typical 45, 60, 90-day kind of a program, and you deliver less and less nicotine as the program goes on. And so it's, again, this combination of a real-life coach, a wearable, constant reminders, and in this case, an active ingredient that's helping the process. So that's just, we're just in prototype development and moving that to the marketplace.
I mean, it really is about the convergence of all these technologies and creating these multimodal therapies around the individual, whether or not we're talking about therapeutics or wellness or education or training or high performance. It's really about leveraging these digital technologies, taking advantage of the advances in neuroscience, blending them together in an effective way to deliver new possibilities for individuals to improve their lives in new ways.
Well, I think that's a really great point. And one of the things that this whole space is bringing out is a blurring of these opportunities as markets. So when we're selling, carbon fiber widgets for fast bicycles, you're targeting a very specific part of what we think of as performance. When we're selling, pharmaceuticals for Alzheimer's patients, we're selling to another place. But if you're talking about just fundamentally enhancing the biology of the human being to get to a better state of performance, that's applicable across the spectrum, and the market changes. So if you think about if we could achieve better sleep, well, that's helpful when I'm suffering from my cancer, and it's also helpful when I'm about to do my triathlon tomorrow.
Right. Ajay, from Samsung's perspective, what type of investments are you making these days? Are you looking just at hardware investments? Are you looking at applications? Are you investing in design labs? What's your perspective these days?
So for us, we believe that Samsung as a corporate is pretty good at doing hardware. They have done that for many years, and they know how to do this very well. What we are augmenting this with is Samsung hasn't been a software-focused company or a software, how can it play with a hardware kind of company. So the mindset is very different. So what we are trying to do is change that with investments and partnerships and acquisitions, all the activities that our Global Innovation Center does around software and services. So we are investing in companies that are software-oriented, that can go with our hardware and create that enhanced user experience. And the areas could be a variety of it. It could be on the mobile device, on big data applications. It could be on the health applications. It could be simple AI for doing a lot of interesting stuff. On security side, it could be. So primarily on the software side. And what kind of companies specifically? Since it's a strategic investment arm, we are looking mostly on the technology side. There is a business aspect because we are financial investor as well, so we have to look at the business aspect. So we look at it as a whole, like a traditional VC firm will look at it as well. But there is a heavy arm on the technology.
AI seems to be a theme that sort of keeps popping up in different ways in our conversation. I'm wondering if the panel could sort of speak to, the power of deep learning to be able to generate more significant outcomes and efficacy of some of the products that are sort of coming out. Tim, you've got some thoughts around sort of deep learning and AI?
Basically, I think the business plan for the next 20 years of anything is AI plus blah. It could be, it's essentially that. AI plus financial services, education, it just goes on down the line. And AI just fundamentally transforms the feedback loop and then the learning and ability to model anything. And so what I kind of wonder could happen is with all of these NeuroGaming or other systems, the more I use it, the more the cloud, the system is basically measuring me and eventually modeling me. And so I remember having this debate with Ray Kurzweil. He's trying to achieve immortality by hacking our wetware, our biology. Where I was saying, I actually think we're going to achieve immortality via software first. With just enough data points, you could probably do a reasonable facsimile of me in data. I am nothing but a giant state machine of preferences and biases and past experiences. With enough data points, you can probably model that. And essentially, you'll have software Tim that I can speak to my great-grandkids and all that sort of thing. And so that's kind of where I wonder if we kind of over time get absorbed into the AI and get modeled. And I'd love that. I'd love machine-assisted creativity. So an example I was giving is every piece of music I've written with enough data points, I could feed that into the machine. It could basically detect the patterns and cadences I like. And then I'll say, okay, machine, create all of the pieces I'll probably write if I was listening to Beatles for 10 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it basically we'll get to that part where AI will start to assist our own thinking, outsource parts that we don't want to deal with. Hey, go think of this for me using my biases, tell me what to do, all right? And then kind of move to that point. So we start to view software as a neuroprosthetic, right?
Right.
And so at some point it'll be kind of, you blur the line of what came from my brain versus the AI-assisted part of my brain.
Great. So are there some downsides to this technology, guys? Are we going to just sort of fall into this virtual universe and have our brains connected? And are there opportunities or ethical issues we should be concerned about? Or right now we just sort of forging forward? Yeah, Charlie.
I have lots of them.
Yeah.
I'm there's part of this that really scares me when we say that this video game can help improve your focus by spending 50 hours shooting and watching women being sexualized and objectified on the video games that our kids are watching. Yeah, great, we have better vision, and so we kill people and treat women as objects. So, what is mind training? What are the ethics behind that? Also, one of our companies is really involved in the Center for Brain Ethics. I might have gotten the name wrong. There's a booth that is back that you can go actually contribute to this. I think we have to be in discussion about what are the ethics of our data. What are we actually training ourselves to do? And I think these are hugely important issues.
I guess I come at it from a regulatory perspective, and the FDA is obviously a major player as you look at new therapeutics, new devices. Anything with a claim that you're improving health is a territory that we think a lot about. And so as you look at different ways that you're actually interacting with the brain, and whether that, how you're doing that, what modality you're using, I think there are going to be major FDA questions and learnings as we get more, as we learn more and more about what is actually going on physically in the brain. The FDA is going to ask more and more questions about what we're doing to actually impact that in a positive and a negative way. And so I think that as we look at this entire field, there are lots of questions we think about from an FDA perspective. Obviously, the FDA has it's the umpire at the baseball game, right? Everyone's going to hate the FDA either way, but it's the conscience I think we all need to have as we think about what we're doing in terms of stimulating brain activity.
Now, I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs out in the audience, so if you'd get your questions ready, we'll turn to you in just a moment. So get your engines and minds thinking. I'd love to have you enter the conversation as well. We've got 40 different companies out there, and I know some of you just sort of showed up, but I know you had a minute or two to walk through. We've got everything from, Meta AR to Z-Space AR to Sixth Sense with their platform for being able to move through virtual reality. What do you see out there that interests you from an investment perspective? Well, I know you're an investor in Interaxon, so that's an easy one, right?
Yeah, I mean, so we've got a few companies that are here.
Right.
Happify, they'll be speaking
Yep.
tomorrow as well. One of the things that, I could talk about individual companies, but I'd kind of rather talk about the whole space. I was here 2 years ago, and it was a very different crowd and audience. The people who are coming here, the people who are interested, that is kind of what I'm interested in, because all of these companies are showing up with better presentations, with more thought out business plans. So I'm impressed with a lot of the technologies that are here today. I think there's going to be a lot of successful people in this space. But I'm watching, the audience and who's here from the corporate sector and who's here from the health insurance perspective, and I'm asking the question, like, building this together. This is about scientists good science, collaborating with great entrepreneurs, great marketers, great salespeople, and people in companies that have the need. So I'm kind of watching that happen, and that's as impressive as anything else for me.
It really is impressive to watch the community sort of come together and blossom over the past couple of years. Absolutely.
I think, and I'd sort of ditto that. Then I'm very impressed by the level of science, and I think that ultimately the number of great scientists that are here and the real core science. And so that's the base. And then these are games. This are consumer products, and so you need entrepreneurs, and you need products that people are going to want to buy, and that's where the real profit and revenue comes from ultimately. So it's that combination of a scientific base, but then something that is really quote unquote addictive. I think from a gaming perspective is really important.
Right.
I think there's two tipping points I'm looking for all the companies. One of them is on the enterprise side, as some of the B2C starts to hit B2B applications. And the first one that cuts a big deal was, say, Oracle or Salesforce for big integration there, and suddenly gets rolled into their first enterprise account with a multi-million. That gets me excited because that's the crossover from B2C to B2B at enterprise scale revenues. The second one is when the gadgets, the devices themselves, become subservient to the services that come with them. I think that's what's happening to the basic wearables now. Those get commoditized. Instead, people ask, what's the service attached to it? Is there an app store or a subscription, coaching, those sorts of things? And you can measure that by the number of businesses start to get sold as what I call device as a service. So it's really $100 a year, comes with the device for free, but it's got that either coaching or that app store or that kind of thing there. And analogous to that is the number of dozens and dozens of developers on anyone's ecosystem. So I think there's going to be a developer ecosystem war for each of the emerging platforms.
Right. Excellent points. Questions from the audience? Yes, we have a question way back there. Please state your name.
Hi, my name is Rashi. So my question is, what is your definition of mindfulness? Is it a certain frequency in the brain? I've heard many different definitions, so as an industry, how do you explain it? Thank you.
Good question for the investment panel. Mindfulness, gentlemen?
This could get deeply philosophical.
Yes, it could.
I think, one of the, and I won't get this exactly correctly, but John Kabat-Zinn, I think, has a really good definition, which is, living mindfully in the present moment without judgment. And I'm going to get that, a little bit off. But it's, it's being aware of what's happening around you at any given moment, and then observing it versus judging it.
Well, that was beautiful. Yeah, we'll take that. Next question.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Greer. I'm from Cognito. Actually, my background is in neuroscience on the academic side. I'm kind of new to the industry world and the investment world, and I'm really impressed with the way that you guys talk about the technologies and the neuroscience, but I get the sense that you're a little bit special. So I'm wondering, what's sort of the general climate in the investment space? Do you guys feel like you're a unique set of investors? What are you hearing from your colleagues that they're getting excited about that might not be as in tune to this technology?
Well, as the guy who actually organized this panel, I handpicked each one of these individual gentlemen for their specific expertise and knowledge of this area, and it's thinner than we would like. But I think it's also broader. I think we all know individuals who are very interested in seeing this space emerge in a much more profound fashion. But that's enough from my perspective. Gentlemen, what would you say?
I think that there are some spaces where you can break your pick and nothing happens, but I really believe that if we build it, they will come on this one. We're in a real market and a real opportunity.
I agree. I'm so excited because I think we're coming to a common language that traditional healthcare folks are coming to the table, and then consumer folks are coming to the table too. And then, like, that's what you said about broadening the market to everybody. The other kind of shorthand I use, this is going to sound so cliched, but the number of folks like us that start to go to things like Burning Man or TED or whatnot, it actually correlates quite well because it really does speak to more open-mindedness about things like empathy and mindfulness and whatnot. So that's on the rise. And at least for me, what I've seen is usually guys, once they hit 40, start thinking a lot more about deeper questions like why are we here and all that other kind of thing. And they start to probe into things like mindfulness and neuroscience and whatnot.
I guess again, I go back to from the neuroscience perspective. If you're really trying to impact disease in neuroscience, the alternatives are they're scary, right? In terms of the time, the investment, the cost to actually come up with new therapeutics is mind-boggling. And so, other ways, other tools are incredibly important. So I think we need to continue to prove that this is applicable and it works. But I agree that if we can do that, there's going to be a lot of investment at capital.
Yeah, we'll know we're there, just like Tim said with AI, when people stop talking about it's a wireless solution or it's mobile or it's the internet and it's just assumed, right? We'll know we're there when it's just people say, well, what's your neuroscience-based game element? What's the mechanic that's driven on a principle that we like? It's just going to be part of everything. I think.
We've had this conversation several times about the future being about buying and selling of experiences.
Sure.
Regardless of what technology is underlying those, it's the buying and selling of experiences.
And how they got into your brain.
Exactly, yeah. And how you feel about that. Yeah. So it's the experiences economy that we're looking at. It's going to be big. Other questions? Yes, one right here.
How's it going? Connor Rusomano from OpenBCI. Tim, I really liked also the phrase "be to freak" and referencing tinkers and Maker Faire. But this is a question for all of you, but what's your opinion on investing in open source business models?
Oh, open source is a really cool starting point, but you want to have a strategy for as it goes commercial, if that's your intent. So not every open source project needs to be commercial, but usually the success path I've seen is that open source is to get community buy-in. It's about radical transparency and let people building their small business on top. But you, as the platform owner, you also have some game plan of which pieces that you want to add on top, especially for, say, hardcore enterprise commercial usages or those sorts of things, more security, more collaboration, all those kinds of things. So that's typically what we've seen on going from open source to commercial.
And I think open source is good for the whole ecosystem. I can see this in virtual reality and even in like legacy stuff.
Android.
Yeah, exactly. So it has to be open source to let the community provide the best way to let the whole thing come up. And then applications and very, very useful services are going to come on top of it.
There's a question right here. There you go.
Hello, my name is Radar Wasenius. I'm the personal brainer at the startup Bream Incorporated. And we help people, to do well and feel well with brain training. But my question to you is, how big do you believe this business could be in, let's say, 3 or 5 years? Brain training, how big do you see it?
Well, if it's any proxy, Lumosity is 1 million paying subs. Average user stays on for close to 2 years. And so, we're talking, there's one proof point of at least north of 100 million a year.
Right. Now, I mean, from my perspective, if you actually take a step back and look at the different major industries that this technology can impact, you're talking about neuropharmaceuticals, which is a $150 billion industry, neurotechnology. You're talking about wellness, corporate wellness, that's another $150 billion industry. You're talking about corporate training, that's another $150 billion industry. And then you've got entertainment, yet another $100 billion industry. And if you imagine that the applications that are going to be built in this space can take maybe 10% market share from those over the next 10 years, minimum, we're talking about a $40 or $50 billion market for these experiential technologies that will transform each one of those spaces. So I think it's a wide open opportunity to be able to invest intelligently in this space if you have the insight to be able to pick the winners.
The way I kind of look at it is, if you're as old as I am and somebody's, when I was growing up and somebody said, you're going out for a run, the question was, who's chasing you? Because we didn't have a physical fitness industry.
Right.
So then great scientists came up with great solutions, and entrepreneurs took those to scale and created that industry. We see a lot of similarities to what's happening, call it mind fitness. We see a lot of the same similarities, and I think that is kind of the next, the next evolution. So I think it's hard to define how large that industry may become, or how it's defined, or what kind of. There's so many different ways that people can come out and contribute to a healthy mind fitness industry.
Right. Other questions? Yes. Back there.
I'm Dilip Kanik. I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm a pediatric neurologist, and we have a few products coming up in neuro education as well as autism. I'm aware of FDA regulations. I went through one and they approved it on a fast track. I was lucky then. But they always differentiate between pediatric and adult. It's very tough to get pediatric. How you investors look on pediatric modalities and devices and applications? Do you differentiate between pediatric and adult, or is good, you go for it?
Yeah, I think pediatrics, especially if you're talking about neurodevelopment and pediatrics, the bar is high from a safety perspective, and so I think it's a big challenge. Obviously, if you're talking about rare genetic diseases, or you're talking about situations where it's a life and death situation, that's different. But I think that in general, pediatrics are hard, and that's why in general you've seen less development there, less investment capital in the pediatric space. So the FDA, I think, appreciates the issue, but getting it to change, I think, is difficult.
I mean, we really haven't had a lot of time to talk about the FDA in this panel, as well as CMS and reimbursement for some of these technologies. We've been, discussing a little bit more of the consumer, applications and how they will get adopted easily and quickly and in profitable ways. But I guess we have a few minutes here. Andy, back to you. What keeps you up at night for the companies that you're investing in the space from a reimbursement perspective?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me about reimbursement. I feel like the FDA is at least a little bit more tangible. Reimbursement, I think, is it's a big question, and so I think it's like anything else that gets approved by the FDA and then gets reimbursed by whether it's CMS or private payers. It's all about efficacy. You've got to be able to prove with hard data that you're having an impact, and I think that bar is a very clear bar. That being said, what I love about the NeuroGaming field and some of the opportunities here is the cost of these technologies is a fraction of the other solutions. And so if we really can come up with data that shows improvement, whether it's cognition, whether it's any type of broad impact, you're gonna have a great case to go to reimbursement agencies with. So I'm optimistic about it, but it's definitely unknown territory right now.
Andy Furlick, do you have a thought on this?
Spent a lot of time working with the FDA and with CMS and insurance companies. What's potentially powerful here is creating value for society by reducing the cost of all this. And I think if you're taking cost out of the system, it makes it more palatable for all the stakeholders, including the reimbursement and regulatory bodies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're almost about to wrap it up here. I would just like to ask each panelist to share one bit of wisdom for the entrepreneurs in the audience to help keep them motivated in their long journeys. As we all know, it's not easy to get an idea to market, and there are a lot of steps in between. So I guess I'd like to start with Tim. Tim, what have you learned over your years that, from the teams that you've worked with that have helped inspire and keep them going, or maybe help them figure out how to shut something down?
One quick lesson is that we all tend to get enamored of the gadget first because it's so new and novel, but think 2 chess moves down the board and really think about how you get developer ecosystem going on it and other people building apps for it and what that must-have service element. Ideally, it really is device as a subscription or device as a service. And if you can have that, you're going to get a lot more investment dollars, I think, because it won't be just about one-hit device.
Right, great.
I think as entrepreneurs, we're always in love with our own ideas. So I think to the extent that we develop our listening skills, it makes us better entrepreneurs. And that means being responsive to the market's feedback and changing and being willing to be more dynamic and more flexible in terms of how we prosecute our business. I think that really helps.
I agree, actually. So what I think about it, that people got to be a little pragmatic about where they are and where they're headed. And I think these kind of events and attending community conferences and all that is very, very important. I've seen people imagining this is the user experience I want to create, this is a service I'm going to build, but I think being very pragmatic where you are, where the ecosystem is, what other people are looking at it, and taking all in and then thinking about it, how should I plan from here on? That's I think, it's an evolving path. I think keep on doing that way.
Charlie, your bit of wisdom.
You are the vision holder, but then how do you get your ego to get out of the way and hire the best people who may be better than you to help bring the vision forward?
So mine is passion. This is all, entrepreneurship is all about having a passion for your idea and being willing to do whatever it takes to make it successful. And whether that's capital, whether that's advice, whether that's team, you've got to have the passion, but you've got to have the open mind to drive it to success.
Passion, there you have it. Thank you, gentlemen.